To me, one of the most interesting and fascinating teams to watch in this NBA offseason, this NBA free agency period in particular, is the Houston Rockets. You've already got James Harden in the mix. You've got Dwight Howard in the mix, and they have the flexibility to go out and make some moves to improve and bolster their roster and potentially help them take that next step in this offseason to become a serious championship contender in the Western Conference. And the Houston Rockets, probably for them, this is the most important offseason they have had in years, because are they going to be able to make those moves that are necessary? Are they going to be able to get the job done? Are they going to make the right decisions that will take them to that next level, that will take them to the conversation of being one of the elite teams in the NBA? And to me, the decision for the Houston Rockets boils down to this. And assuming all other things, that both players want to come there and the Houston Rockets have the ability to get both of them, the ultimate decision I think that the Houston Rockets face is which player is better for them now and in the future, and which player is the bigger priority, assuming that you can't bring both into the fold. Is it better for them to re-sign Chandler Parsons, a young athletic wing, or is it better to go with a veteran stretch four with championship experience like Chris Bosh? When you look at Chandler Parsons, there's a lot to like about him. This is a kid that will turn 26 at the beginning of the 2014-2015 NBA season. Last year was his third season in the league. He averaged 16 points a game, 5.5 rebounds as the number 3 guy for the Houston Rockets, but behind James Harden, behind Dwight Howard. Here's a young athletic wing. And what I like about him too is he hasn't even reached the peak years of his career yet. There's still room for growth. He could still grow as a player, especially on the defensive end, and I think on the offensive end as well. You're talking about a guy with some real legitimate all-star potential to his game. So now you're talking about a player that you're familiar with, that you've had in the system, you've had in the fold the past 3 years. You know he can play with James Harden and Dwight Howard, and you're looking at possibly having to re-sign him for $45 million over 3 years. Now, that might be a little bit more than what you wanted to do, but the Houston Rockets gambled here. They didn't pick up his option because they wanted him to be a restricted free agent, because they wanted some flexibility and they wanted to take a gamble. Well, it's time to figure out which side they're going to gamble on, because if they let Chandler Parsons leave, you are basically bolstering another team in the Western Conference in the Dallas Mavericks, while potentially weakening yourself, especially if you're not able to ultimately bring Chris Bosh into the fold. What I like about Chandler Parsons, $15 million a year. While it's high, it's not a big-time super $20+ million contract, and I think it's a better contract than what, say, the Charlotte Hornets offered to a Gordon Hayward that the Jazz have to decide if they're going to match or not, because that was for more years. You're talking about Chandler Parsons, 3 years, and then at age 28, 29, he'd be a free agent again, so you have flexibility in what you're going to do, and his cost isn't that prohibitive to your organization because of the fact it'd only be at $15 million a season as opposed to what you might have to pay at Chris Bosh. You could primarily keep the rest of your core and nucleus of your team intact and still be able to keep Chandler Parsons in the fold while sitting there and sticking the screws to your in-state rival, your Western Conference rivals, the Dallas Mavericks. Now, if the Houston Rockets decide that the roll of the dice indicates that they need to let Chandler Parsons leave and pursue Chris Bosh and get Chris Bosh into the fold, here's what they get. You get a big man that's 30 years old that averaged 16 points a game and 6 rebounds a game last season for the Miami Heat as the number 3 option behind LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. What you do get, and what I like for Chris Bosh in his fit for the Houston Rockets, is you really, based off of the way his game has changed over the past couple of years, even though I'm not fully a fan of it, Chris Bosh has really become a stretch 4. And in that case, he fits perfectly for the Houston Rockets because he's not a guy that's going to sit down in the post a lot. I think he complements Dwight Howard very well, and he helps stretch out the paint area very well. And you're talking about a stretch 4 that understands how to fit with other pieces. He understands how to sacrifice for the greater good. We're talking about a Chris Bosh that when he was in Toronto was averaging 22, 23, 24 points a game every season. Yet when he goes to Miami, he was a willing number 3 option, averaging 18, 16 points a game. He understood how to sacrifice. He understood how to make his talents fit with Wade and LeBron in order to help out the greater good. And here's a stretch 4 with championship experience. 4 straight appearances in the NBA Finals. 2 NBA championships, something that Chandler Parsons definitely does not bring to the fold. He doesn't bring that ability as a stretch four like a Chris Bosh does. He doesn't quite have that veteran leadership and experience that a Chris Bosh does. He doesn't have that understanding of how to win championships like a Chris Bosh does. The problem for Chris Bosh, though, even though he's such a great fit for what the Houston Rockets might envision him for and what they might need from him, is the fact that he's probably going to be looking for close to a veteran max contract, which might mean as much as $80 million or more over the next 4 seasons. Over $20 million a year potentially to a guy that's already 30 years of age with a lot of NBA mileage on his body. That might not be anything better than what he already is. So what you saw out of him in Miami the past couple of seasons is pretty much what you're going to get. And at some point in time, he might regress back from that. That's a very prohibitive contract that prevents you in a lot of ways from doing anything else to really bolster the roster. You pretty much have created an environment where you're basically built around 3 players, and you have to hope that's enough in the Western Conference to even make it to the NBA Finals, let alone win an NBA championship. And you think about it, in order to bring a Bosh in, they have to trade off a Jeremy Lin, and they might have to get rid of a few other pieces. So whereas Chris Bosh would seem like a great fit, and in theory he is, this is also a big roll of the dice if the Houston Rockets ultimately sign him. It'll be a very interesting next couple of days for the Houston Rockets organization and general manager Daryl Morey. This could be a set of time over the next 48 hours or so that potentially determines the Houston Rockets' future for the next half decade or more. It's that significant. It's that important. And it's a really important decision, and I'm going to be interested to see what they do. But I want to ultimately know from you, what do you think? Because I think you can make arguments for both sides. Chandler Parsons, has more room for growth potential. He's a younger player, an impressive athletic all-around wing that can get better and comes at a cheaper price, whereas Chris Bosh is that stretch forward that I think every NBA team needs in today's game, that knows how to mesh his talents with other star players. He understands how to take a little bit of a backseat. He has a willingness to sacrifice for the greater good, and he brings more championship experience while also potentially saddling you with a worse contract for a longer period of time and also forcing you to peel off some additional pieces. So if you're in the chair as the Houston Rockets general manager right now, are you going to match Chandler Parsons' offer sheet, or are you going to let him go and risk that you can bring in Chris Bosh? Which player is better for them? Which player do you think ultimately gets them closer to being an NBA championship team?